AM radio, an op-ed column, and Fox News is not enough. I want a center-right nation to fight for its soul, and its soul is represented in the arts. Its soul is represented in a world in which media is everything. AM radio is the lowest form of communication. It's tinny, it's not robust, it's not Avatar. I want Avatar. I want the right to enter the world of media to the extent and invest in media the way that the left does.
The fake media is trying to silence us, but we will not let them, because the people know the truth. The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House, but I'm president and they're not.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast, a Breitbart.com podcast. The podcast starts now. Here's Curt with today's headlines.
Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Curt Schilling Podcast. Great show lined up today. We're going to kick it off with Eric Eggers. This is a gentleman who's been involved in a book you're going to have to read. He's also a research director for GAI. He worked under famed investigative journalist Peter Schweizer. He was heavily involved in research for the national bestsellers Clinton Cash, Extortions, and Secret Empires. That's going to be a fun one. And then, and by the way, Shonda, good morning.
Morning.
My wife is here today. Sparkles, as she's known on radio circles. We'll be talking with Sonnie Johnson here in a little while, and I'm sure her and Sparkles will have much to talk about. But first off, we're going to go to sound. And I really, this is my favorite part of the show every day, because I think that there is so much happening in the news, and so many things are being covered up or passed over or missed because of the volume. But the left gives us enough examples of their ignorance and their stupidity and their just outright hatred of this country. If you look, you don't have to look close, you just have to look. Monday on CNN's Cuomo Primetime, Chris Cuomo, who, by the way, the only qualification he has of being on the TV is his last name. There's nothing about him that's a journalist or a news person other than he has a good last name. I want you to listen to this soundbite and understand. I'm not going to set up. I'm going to tell you what you're going to hear beforehand, but I want you to listen for it. He is going to defend Antifa's violence with some sort of moral stance. Listen up to this soundbite.
The bigots are wrong to hit. Antifa or whomever, anarchist or malcontent or misguided, they are also wrong to hit. But fighting hate is right. And in a clash between hate and those who oppose it are on the side of right. Think about it. Civil rights activists, were they the same morally as the bigots, as the racists with whom they exchanged blows? Are people who go to war against an evil regime on the same moral ground as those they seek to stop from oppressing the weak? When you punch me in the nose for being Italian and you say I'm somehow less than, am I in the same moral place when I punch you back for saying that? It's not about it being right in the eyes of the law, but you also have to know what's right and wrong in a moral and a good and evil sense. That's why people who show up to fight against bigots are not to be judged the same as the bigots, even if they do resort to the same kinds of petty violence. The law will take care of that. How you disagree matters. We should be our best. But I am arguing that it was wrong to create a moral equivalency between bigots and those who oppose them, making them equal wrongs. Those hateful few who take solace and encouragement from the president's efforts, my message to you is simple. Be aware there are many more of us who see you as unequal, as less than, and you will be opposed at every turn, because what you are about is wrong, and fighting you is right.
That felt like a rhyme that was never going to end, first of all.
Right.
And
but did you hear?
It's like circling. He kept circling.
But he has done what the left has managed to continue to do. He flipped the sides. the Antifa is absolutely the party of hate and violence.
Well, and he's saying that they're going to be, let the law take care of it.
No, but he's trying to put himself and them on a moral high ground by saying we're fighting for justice and truth in the American way, when they're actually doing the exact opposite. They are fascists. Antifa is a group of fascists. And KKK, the KKK is a group of socialists. Neither of these things are American conservative values. These are hateful, spiteful, violent people who he's trying to give them a morally just reason for hitting other people, for attacking other people, and it's completely the opposite.
I just don't understand. I mean, do they have a leader, and can
No.
That's what I'm saying. Why can't we? If you want your point. Back in the 60s, you marched.
Yeah, but it's not enough anymore.
But they're not marching.
No.
They are showing up at things that are
Well, they did
opposite
march.
of
I mean, the whole – they tried to draw this whole march in D.C. as a white supremacy. There was like 20 people from some white Aryan nation, whatever, and there were a couple hundred Antifa people. The people that were marching for white supremacy aren't marching for anything anybody in this argument represents.
I think that the news and everything is just highlighting the top extreme of both sides and portraying the rest of the world.
But this is why this stuff happens. You get to this next one. I want you to listen to Sarah Huckabee Sanders at the press briefing, White House press briefing. Listen to what she says, and then we can talk about how the media spun it.
Sarah, have you asked the president if he's ever used the N-word?
The president addressed that question directly via Twitter. I'd refer you back to him. I can certainly say I've never heard him use that term or anything similar.
Have you asked him directly, Sarah?
The president, I didn't have to, because he addressed it to the American people all at one time.
Why haven't you asked him directly?
Again, the president answered that question directly on Twitter earlier today.
Can you stand at the podium and guarantee the American people they'll never hear Donald Trump utter the N-word on a recording in any context?
I can't guarantee anything, but I can tell you that the president addressed this question directly. I can tell you that I've never heard it. I can also tell you that if myself or the people that are in this building serving this country every single day, doing our very best to help people all across this country and make it better, if at any point we felt that the president was who some of his critics claim him to be, we certainly wouldn't be here. This is a president who is fighting for all Americans, who is putting policies in place that help all Americans, particularly African Americans. Just look at the economy alone. This president, since he took office in the year and a half that he's been here, has created 700,000 new jobs for African Americans. That's 700,000 African Americans that are working now, working when this president took place. When President Obama left after 8 years in office, he had only created 195,000 jobs for African Americans. President Trump, in his first year and a half, has already tripled what President Obama did in 8 years. Not only did he do that for African Americans, but for Hispanics. 1.7 million more Hispanics are working now. This is a president who cares about all Americans, who is committed to helping them, and is putting policies in place that actually do that. Kevin. Sorry, Kristen, I'm going to go ahead to Kevin. Kevin, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Just to be clear, you can't guarantee it.
Look, I haven't been in every single room. I can tell you the president has addressed this directly. He's addressed it directly to the American people, and I can tell you what the focus and the heart of the president is, and that's on helping all Americans. And certainly this is somebody who has been in business for decades, and you're just now hearing some of these outrageous accusations after the fact. He's dealt with people all over the world. It wasn't until he became a candidate for president that you started to hear some of these salacious and ridiculous claims. And certainly, I think if you look at the actions that this president has taken, certainly the policies that he's enacted, you can see the heart of who he is, and you can see exactly what he has done and the type of president and person he is.
Gotta give it to Sarah. Boy.
She's, but the amount of effort that they're putting into this is absolute. I mean, these people are becoming a walking punchline. She couldn't have been more explicitly clear.
Okay, and here's the thing. Whether you say yes, no, whatever, when most of these people were kids, it wasn't what it is today that you did not say.
Well, but again.
No, I'm saying, though. So it wasn't politically correct. So they're hypocritical.
Well,
saying
I would be absolutely blown away. I can't see him saying the word. It's such a word. It's an exclusive word. There are people who were raised in the South,
but it wasn't like that 40 years ago.
Yeah, but it was. That word's always been as bad as it's ever been. It was just used all 40 years ago more than it is today because it is a repulsive, disgusting word, and there is no proper use of it, even though you can hear it every other word in black rap, apparently, because they're allowed to say it and we're not. But the whole, I don't. What was their angle?
It was
that
was 5 pointless minutes.
Right. No, but
audio.
what she was asking, the subliminal message here is, if he has said the N-word once in his life, he's the racist we all thought he was.
Or you're not going to say yes, so I'm going to assume he did.
Right.
So there was no getting around that question.
And then you have a black woman who has been given, I don't know how many chances to make something of herself, given the opportunity of a lifetime to work in the White House and do things and have an impact. And it turns out, I said yesterday, why are we surprised when the scorpion getting the ride across the river from the frog stings the frog? Why are we surprised when the scorpion stings, as we all know? Well, listen to this is Omarosa on MSNBC's Live talking about apparently the president runs around grabbing boobs and kissing people in the White House. Listen up.
Did you feel like you were harassed by him in the White House for being a woman? Harassed in a sexual way at any point? Did he harass anybody in a sexual way? Any Me Too moments?
I don't know that I would characterize them as Me Too, but I saw in your book, for instance, where he grabbed you and he kissed you without you welcoming that. He did that very often with women anytime he wanted. He's very physical. He would grab women, kiss them unsolicited, anytime, any day.
See, I find that interesting because if I'm around somebody who kisses me all the time, that's uncomfortable. And that's Me Too.
But
that's a Me Too. So how is it not a Me Too? It's a convenient.
You also notice she didn't say that he ever did it to her.
Her, yeah. Right?
But again, she is everything you thought she was. She just, I don't know. Well, then let's bring in the loonies on the left. Frederica Wilson, the cowboy hat wearing Democrat from Florida who has about as much, I think she's on the cusp of some sort of neurological issue based on the stuff coming out of her mouth. But she reacted to Trump calling Omarosa a dog. Listen up to Frederica.
A dog? How dare he? He has taken this country to its knees. We already have racism raining down all over America. People can't even enjoy themselves. They can't even enjoy an evening out. And I remember specifically telling the boys in the 5,000 Role Models of Excellence Project, be very careful because when they walk to a corner, someone locks the door. People hold on to their purse. If they get on an elevator, people get off. These are boys of color. And now you have to say it to everyone because everyone is a target. We're finding that college students, they're calling the police because they went to sleep in the dorm. A little girl was selling water on the side of the street, and they called the police. And the president of the United States is calling a woman of color a dog? How dare he? How dare he call anyone a dog? He has a nickname for everyone, and his nickname is Don in the First Grade Reader. That's his nickname. And we have to stop him. And the only way we can stop him and stop all of this foolishness and all of this hate and all of this racism that's raining down on America is we've got to send a blue wave through this country in the midterms. And then we've got to send a blue wave in November, and we'll shut down all of this racism. LeBron James said it correctly when he said, racism has always existed. But President Trump has emboldened the racists to come forward without any fear or fear of punitive actions. And we have got to stop this.
So here's my thing. If you go, anywhere you go, there's black and white couples everywhere.
Right.
I mean, no, I'm saying like you
Right.
see
No, I
it,
know.
you see it on the TV. You see, so what becomes their issue? Like, what are they
Well,
going to say when
Please explain.
that becomes the majority?
Please explain to me what racism raining down looks like. She said it twice. Racism raining down in America. There's and LeBron was right. There's always been racism. There always will be racism because in this country, our First Amendment protects dirtbags as much as it does good people. But that's not a crime. Being a dirtbag isn't a crime.
Okay, so when I feel very strongly about a point, you can hear it in the voice. She's just casually talking.
Because she's
like,
full of
there's
crap.
no passion in that.
No, but and let me just preface this by saying, you know what? As the President of the United States, you don't call anybody a dog. I mean, come on, you have to be better than that. And this is, as somebody who's said things that they shouldn't say, we're going to hear in the next soundbite the fact that sometimes the apple does fall far away from the tree when you hear from Ron Reagan Jr. coming up. But the fact of the matter is, Ronald Reagan, in my mind, was how my president should act. Mm-hmm. Class and dignity and all the things that he had, that's gone. That left with Clinton, that left with the Bushes, that left with Obama, and that certainly isn't the case with Trump. I've stopped looking for a moral compass in the White House.
Moral compass in the world.
Well, but no, that's not there. But there are stories. Listen, you and I are around enough to see everyday stories of mankind that give us hope. There are amazing people doing amazing things all over the world. Those stories don't get covered anymore because the left is so bent on making you think this country is going down the tubes when in fact it isn't, and they're actively rooting for it. But you listen to a woman like this speak, and all I can say is you should be absolutely ashamed if you ever voted for her. She is a train wreck of epic proportions, and she's embarrassing. She doesn't represent anything in this country or anybody other than a small constituency in her office. And as I said earlier, I want you to listen to MSNBC on MSNBC's Hardball. Ron Reagan Jr. try and tell us what exactly President Trump has done with the office of the president.
If the last 2 years have taught us anything, it's that Donald Trump does not appreciate or grasp the grandeur and the dignity of the office he holds. And you're quite right that when people come to that office, if they're good people, they grow into it to the extent that they can. Trump has had the opposite effect. He is not growing into the dignity and the grandeur of the office. He is dragging that dignity and that grandeur through the gutter, because that's who he is. There is no larger self there that he is going to assume now that he has taken office. This is what we get. Aisha was correct at the beginning. We should have known this all along, and many of us did. What do you think you're going to get when you install in the Oval Office an imbecilic sociopath? Things are not going to turn out well.
Well, maybe where we're headed. But Aisha, thank you so much. I just want to remind everybody about somebody I disagree with on almost everything. Ronald Reagan Sr., the president. And I have to say something about him. He wouldn't walk. This is about head of state, not about policy, left, center, right, or anything. He wouldn't walk into the Oval Office without his suit coat on. It was that serious. And I like that. The older I get, the more I like a little formality, a little class in our president.
I think that's interesting considering where, like, when you look at things today, like the teachers. Did you ever see your teacher come to school that she wasn't dressed to the nines? Getting on a flight, Garrison was surprised that the people in Prague dressed to get on the flight. Yeah. Like, we're wearing spandex shorts, tank tops onto the flight. It's changing. I love the way that it is. You know, even going to church, you don't have to dress to go to church. And it doesn't have anything to do with him dressing to church for the office, but it is a different world.
Yeah, well, my biggest issue is that Chris Matthews, who had a tingle up his leg every time he saw Obama, who tried as hard as he could to be cool and hip and failed in every possible way. And I mean, well,
it's not that. It's that we're holding people to a standard that we don't even hold ourselves, and that's as Christians. I mean, that's the thing. If you believe in Christianity, nobody's perfect. Right. So there's not going to be, how can you hold your
Christians? There's nothing. Yeah, those people are atheists or well, as we're finding out in Minnesota, they're something far different So anyway, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to be joined by Eric Eggers, research director for GAI, who has helped put together the stories Clinton Cash, extortion, and secret empires. He's been knee-deep in a lot of things. You're going to want to hear from him. Back in just a minute.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Jeannie in Pennsylvania.
I think we've gotten away from what we really hired him to do, which is draining the swamp. If you look at the real picture of draining a swamp, you go in and you take all the water out of it. What does it leave? It leaves the gunk. He cannot get rid of the gunk. We have to get rid of the gunk. Everything he's doing, he's lowering the water so we can see who needs to go. The only way they can go is if we vote them out.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
You're listening to the Curt Schilling Podcast. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now is a gentleman who I've been wanting to speak to for a little while. He is a senior member at the Government Accountability Institute. He is one Eric Eggers. Good morning, Eric. How are you?
Hey, Curt. Great to be here.
Thank you. The book he has written called Fraud, How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election is something that should, I don't say this lightly, Eric, it should terrify people because I didn't realize some things. I'm an avid information hound. I want to read, I want to study, I want to understand. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, first of all, how is voter ID a racist thing? And, the left is doing all this other stuff, blah, blah, blah. But I had no idea. Here's a number. Let me find this number. 248 counties in this country have more registered voters than citizens. That's mind-boggling to me. I mean, especially now, Eric, when we're looking at elections that are being swung by a couple hundred votes. In in Florida, there's 2,100 double votes?
It's a great point, Curt, and I think you raise a lot of important issues that I think most people should be aware of if they're not. But one of the reasons why they're not is because you always hear this narrative that, voter fraud is a myth or it's as common as a lightning strike, and it's not happening on a...
Yes. The left has assaulted that thing and basically told us that everything you're saying is, oh, my God, you guys, they're embellishing. Don't listen to them.
Well, I don't think anybody would dispute the facts that I'm currently laying out. The question is just how meaningful are they? So to me, the fact that there's 248 counties where there's more registered voters than citizens of legal voting age, that's meaningful. The fact that there's nearly 3 million people who are registered to vote in more than one state in this country, that's meaningful. The fact that even
Say that
President
again.
Obama...
Say that again.
Yeah,
there are 3 million people. 3 million?
3 million.
People are registered to vote in more than one state, which, by the way, is illegal. In case anybody didn't know that. 3 million people in this country registered to vote in more than one state. And Eric, I'm curious, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have so many questions to ask you. I've heard recently in the past couple elections that there is a movement up here in the New England states where they bus people across borders to vote in other states' elections. Is that actually a thing?
That's certainly reporting that. I mean, there's definitely reporting that says that's accurate. And luckily, while there are people on the right that say, hey, this is an issue that we need to take a look at, and most people on the left do not, there are exceptions. And one of them is actually the New Hampshire Secretary of State, who himself was a firsthand witness to a case of voter fraud. And he's actually one of the few Democrats that was participating in this overall audit of election results. And he's the one that's been an advocate saying, no, this is a good thing. We need to be doing this because in states like New Hampshire, the laws vary across the country. But in states like New Hampshire, you have what's called the intent to reside rule to vote. So what the Secretary of State of New Hampshire witnessed was somebody, I believe, was in college and was part of this get out the vote effort. He showed up at a polling place and he said, well, I don't live here. And says, I don't live in New Hampshire, so I guess I can't vote here. And it was a poll worker that actually said, well, wait a minute. I mean, are you sure you won't live here? Maybe you want to go to college here or something. And so he's like, well, yeah, maybe. And he was able to legally cast a vote. And this is the Secretary of State witnessing it. And the real shame of it is, Curt, the Secretary of State said, I couldn't do anything about it because that's what the law allows. And that's really I think, the key. That's what the key thing to understand here is that while the left says that voter fraud is not a real problem, the definition that the left uses to justify that is under-inclusive. It defines voter fraud in the narrowest possible terms. It only defines it as an intentional effort on the part of a non-voter to impersonate a legal voter. But as the Secretary of State Gardner's example that I talk about in the book shows, and as the numerous other examples that people are aware of, voter fraud is anything, I think, that discounts the true weight of an honest American vote, and like that's common sense. But there's a lot of stuff that's legal that goes on that allows people to do things, right? I mean, I talk about in the book about this campaign in South Florida, and they go out and they harvest all these absentee ballot requests.
I was going to say, can you explain? Can you explain granny farming? Because that one bothers me. And it sounds funny, but it's actually very, very deceptive and evil at its core.
Granny farming is not something that happens in a garden, but it does happen in our backyard, right? I mean, granny farming is something that happens when senior citizens, and even the people that would deny that voter fraud is a problem, would say that the most vulnerable population for voter fraud would be senior citizens. Because what you've got these, this is an elderly population. And so you've got these political activists that go out and they have relationships with the senior citizens and they befriend them and they help them fill out an absentee ballot request form, but then they're there. And oftentimes these are people that are not necessarily actively engaged in society. And so they're filling out the absentee ballot request forms and they fill out the ballots themselves. There's one lady in South Florida was caught with notebooks detailing thousands of transactions between political campaigns and senior citizens whose votes she had harvested. She ended up not being charged with very serious crimes because actually one of the ladies whose ballot she had taken died before any charges could be filed. So it's a very real problem. And since the book's come out, I'm receiving lots of other people reaching out and say they've personally witnessed people that work at residential facilities filling out ballots on behalf of senior citizens without the ballot there. So, I mean, I think it just speaks to the fact that absentee ballots specifically is an honor system. There's very little oversight regarding, how they're cast and tabulated.
This brings me to 2 points. First off, when you talk about what granny farming is, there's clearly this is not an off-the-cuff kind of a spur-of-the-moment thing. This is a carefully concocted plan that is organized by a group of people. But you can't have these movements. You can't have these things without money. And it all comes back to and circles around to another thing the left has done is they've made George Soros's name kind of like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. And anybody that mentions George Soros's name is just grasping for straws and blah, blah, blah. I mean, this guy started his life aiding and abetting the Nazi party and rounding up his neighbors and has done nothing in his life that isn't in support of a globalist platform. But all of these groups you're finding these people involved in and with, they are all tied in many legitimately easy to find ways as being funded by George Soros or George Soros's minions.
100%. And the one thing I would say is I think that there's a bit of a sea change maybe just because I live in Tallahassee, Florida, and the mayor of Tallahassee is actually running for governor of Florida as a Democrat. And he's taken lots of money from George Soros, and he's actually not ashamed of it, and he's tried to offer up defenses. So I do think that there are people that are engaging with the network that won't cast it as a boogeyman. They're like, well, yeah, no, we're fighting for a progressive vision of the country. So it's becoming maybe normalized now in a way that wasn't the case previously. But just take a look at what happened in Ohio, right? And I wrote a piece about this. But so you got a very close election in the congressional seat in Ohio right now. I think it's about maybe 1,000 votes, depending upon how many ballots they found last night. So in the state of Ohio for the last 3 years, the people that administer elections in Ohio have had to fight Soros-funded efforts to do two things. One is to remove illegal voters from the voter rolls, right? People that shouldn't be on the voter rolls because they don't live there anymore or they're felons or non-citizens or whatever it is. But just the idea that we want to do an audit and say, hey, are the people who are registered to vote in our state, are they legally allowed to vote? And if they're not, we should remove them. Well, they had to fight Soros-funded efforts to do that. And in fact, just the Supreme Court ruling a few months ago said that they are legally allowed to do that. It was a 5-4 ruling. But they also had to block a Soros-funded effort, which was actually litigated by Clinton campaign attorney Mark Elias ahead of the 2016 election. And Mark Elias filed suit on behalf of several groups to try to block Ohio's use of voter ID law. And so what's really fun about that, and I talk about the book, because what the source groups do are two things. They fight any effort to make elections more secure, but then they fund groups to then exploit the vulnerabilities and funnel as many voters through those gaps that the other organizations have fought to make sure still exist. And so the Ohio example with the voter ID law is perfect, because one of the groups on whose behalf Mark Elias filed the lawsuit to block the voter ID law, one of those groups had an employee that was convicted of registering dead people to vote. So it's a classic crystallization of the synergy of the effort.
Yeah, and also I would argue, as I look up criminal statutes, there are heavy penalties for voter fraud that don't seem to be being reinforced, except against potential conservative people. But I got to ask you this. I continue to hear the fight around voter ID, and I'm wondering what's more racist. The fact that you want all of your voters to have a government-issued ID to be legal citizens, or the fact that you think asking minorities to have a government ID is too hard for them?
Yeah, it reeks of paternalism, doesn't it? And
it's embarrassing.
And here's what's worse, is the stats don't back up the position. So Ohio, Alabama, and Georgia, have all recently passed voter ID laws. And actually, they've seen increases in minority turnout. The state of Alabama, I think, is the most recent one to do it. And in the Senate election, the special election with Roy Moore, you actually saw higher levels of minority participation than you had before you had no voter ID laws. So, there is no evidence to suggest that voter ID laws suppress or oppress minority turnout. The Washington Post
never has been.
Right. The Washington Post came out with one study that claimed to show it, but it was actually quickly debunked by Ivy League scholars. They said, no, you've got massive problems with your data stuff here. I mean, the reality is this, Kurt. If you want to buy a beer, if you want to get on an airplane, or, and this is my favorite, if you'd wanted to go to the Democratic National Convention in 2016, you'd have needed one thing. Guess what it is?
Yeah, a government-issued ID.
Exactly. So, so I appreciate that, people like you and others that I think are recognizing, come on, it sort of beggars belief that we shouldn't have to have an ID.
Right. Well, that we're having this conversation is embarrassing. Why would we be arguing against government ID for voters? Why would we be the only country on the planet that would allow voters that don't live here to vote in our election? The logic, there is no logic. There is no path to that. But I'll tell you what the terrifying number for the left is, Eric. In the last 18 months, if you believe the latest polls, black support for likely voters for the president have gone from 6 to 21%. And I've had many people that are election experts tell me that the second the black vote gets above 15% Republican, we'll never have another Democratic president in our lifetimes. And I can understand why that increase is happening, but I can also I'm actually worried. The only thing that worries me coming up is the things that you've talked about. And, guy, let me just mention this again, folks. The book is called Fraud, How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election. You can buy it anywhere good books are sold until Amazon figures out that it's a good conservative book and tries to get you not to be able to find it. But the fact of the matter is I'm worried about voter fraud in the midterms in ways that I've never been worried, because I didn't realize the things that you said. Over 3 million people, I don't know if you heard that, 3 million American voters are registered in 2 different states. There are 248 counties that have more registered voters than citizens. There are multiple thousands of votes being cast as double votes, and they're being done intentionally. And they're being done by groups funded by George Soros. And you can find out all you want about that in the book, Fraud, How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election. Eric, listen, this was great. I would love to have you back, pal.
Hey, I'm happy to come back anytime. Maybe next time we can talk about Tom Perez and the plot that allowed non-citizens to vote.
Yeah. Oh no. Listen, we already have California people putting in non-citizens in political office, so this is all going to hell in a handbasket fast. So anyway, thank you, Eric.
Tom Perez's hometown. Yeah, no, happy to do it, Kurt. It was great to be here.
All right, pal. You take care.
All right.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
A lot of people not knowing what action they could or should take to make the difference. What I do is try to turn people on to sites like Breitbart, people who are writing and publishing the truth so that people will get educated. But, you kind of can't blame productive members of society who are kind of confused, perplexed as to what do we do to take this government back.
Sirius XM Patriot, Channel 125. We want to hear from you. Tweet the show at Garrick38. Once again, here's Curt Schilling.
Joining me now is the host of Sonnie's Corner on Sirius XM Patriot 125 every Saturday from 1 to 3, as well as her podcast, Did She Say That? Sonnie Johnson, good morning. How are you?
Blessed and highly favored. How are you guys this morning?
I'm doing good. Can you say hello to Sparkles? So,
she doesn't understand
No,
Sparkles.
so I had Diamond and Silk on, and when I had Diamond and Silk on, Shonda gave herself the nickname Sparkles.
That's what I have to be referred to when Diamond and Silk is on.
Oh, wow. Go ahead, Sparkles. See, I'm going to call you that from now on. You done branded your nickname with me. You got it. It's going to stick.
Hey, Sonnie, listen, I haven't talked to you since it happened, but I actually had Candace Owens on after her and Charlie Kirk were accosted in Philadelphia. And I swear, I watched that whole incident, and all I could think of was you. Mm-hmm. Because I was wondering, from a woman who isn't maybe as relaxed and laid back and as restrained as Candace, I'm wondering what you thought about the situation first off, because I thought every bit of it was repulsive and disgusting. But secondly, how do you react in that situation if it happens to you?
Actually, I go out of my way to make sure that it doesn't happen to me. And I guess that's one of the pitfalls of why I don't get the viral videos or whatever. I came from a neighborhood where you did everything in your power to not put yourself in a position like that. Like, you literally, it wasn't a matter of fun and games. It wasn't a matter of catching it for video and having it go viral. It was about, if you put yourself in certain positions, you might not go home that day. Mm-hmm. And I have become very adept to understanding that these situations are not safe situations. And I'll honestly tell you, I have been with a conservative who has gotten punched in the face because they wanted the video. Like, that is not something that registers with me. It is not a part of this new social media kind of aspect that I am willing to grasp. My first priority is my own self-protection. You know what I'm saying? My own self-well-being. So I really do my best to not put myself in such positions. And if I am going out, I have a really, really big husband. And I don't think people like to test that kind of situation when they actually walk up on it. So for the most part, no one ever says anything to me, and I'm able to freely move about and not get put into that position. But I do make sure I travel with my husband, and we both are concealed carry. So just know that.
Well, that's interesting, because Garrison and I flew out to Prague last week, and Tucker Carlson was in the airport with us in Massachusetts. And my first reaction was, these people are crazy here. And he just was like smiling and walking around. And my gut reaction, because of the way that people treat us here, was, somebody's going to be an idiot to him. And, he was a couple down, so I don't know if it ever did happen. But that was my first reaction, too. He's on TV all the time, and people can recognize him.
But this started with, this has been started kind of that anarchist strain has always been there. So I don't want to say started, but it really started to crank up to where it was becoming rationalized and acceptable on the left during Occupy Wall Street. And if you remember then, it was Andrew who, went down to the Occupy sites and had to scream, stop raping women, because they had actual rape tents amongst them so women could sleep and not have to worry about someone sneaking in and actually forcing themselves on them. So, like, all of this stuff, that was a Me Too movement that the left missed. All of this stuff is just a continuation. And because we haven't been able to beat back their philosophy, it continues to spread. The more it spreads, the more it infects. The more it infects, the more it becomes acceptable. To where you have people like Cuomo on the news now talking about how Antifa are righteous because of who they are standing up against. So at that point, balance is acceptable. No, balance is not acceptable. It is never acceptable. And that is the reason that we have police, so that we do not take our frustrations out on each other. That's when the societal breakdown actually happens at that point. Antifa knows it. They know that that creates anarchy. And when they have idiots in the left-wing progressive media capping for them like they don't understand the results of this, it is really incumbent upon us to make sure we are pushing first principles as much as we can to combat this nonsense.
Yeah, I actually played the sound earlier of Chris Cuomo, and I got to tell you, what a putz. I mean, there's nothing about that man other than his last name that deserves to have him on television. He actually said he wasn't being a roundabout kind of on the edges, fringy, kind of, read between the lines. He was directly saying Antifa is every bit legitimized in their violence because of what they're violent against. And
yes.
It's just,
and if you think about it, since I have been coming on your show, there are three things that I told you are going to represent the new platform of the Democratic Party. It is going to be the Democratic Socialists. They are now on the ballot with people like Alexander Cortez. And I told you those lovers of Sharia, it's not going to necessarily be the religion so much as the practice of Sharia. They are now on the ballot in Minnesota. And the last step will be when you see an openly supportive Antifa person taking office, you will start to see that is their crux, that is their base, that will be the new face of the Democratic Party. And if we do not have a Republican Party that understands that and is setting itself up to be a response to that, then we are doing a disservice to our country.
So when they take office, we'll see them because they'll have the mask across their face.
No, but that's the point. You remember when the socialists used to hide, where it used to be shameful to be a socialist? It used to be shameful to be a... They're not hiding anymore. And there will come a point where Antifa won't hide anymore either. And that's what I'm saying. That's when all the masks are off. That is when they are no longer hiding who they are, what they want, what their end result looks like. We haven't hit that point yet. And we have a chance to pull back before we get to that point. And we need to make sure we're doing everything in our power to make that pullback happen.
It dawns on me that watching Antifa this past week, and by the way, I posted a picture. I put together a little picture of there was a young black woman in 1964. She was part of a group called the Nine, and she was being kicked out of a school, and there's a picture of her, and it's in black and white, and it's all white people and white women shouting her down. She's got her head down walking away. And I put it right next to a picture of all these white people shouting down Candace Owens with her head down walking away. And she's surrounded by black, brown, yellow police officers. And these people are yelling, F you, F this, racist, scumbag, pigs, blah, 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 blah. And they're all white people. And it dawns on me that Antifa is exactly who the left said the Tea Party was. Radical this and radical and violent. But that's exactly who Antifa is. The march the other day with 20...
Antifa is exactly that. And, I'm not discounting how vicious they are and how terrible they are. But let me tell you what the difference between that photo was and the occurrence with Candace and Charlie. The difference was, at that point, the government was standing on the side of the people yelling and screaming.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that.
Yep. No, the Democratic government. Yes.
And
yes.
Yes, but in this is no government force. This is American on American and how we interact with each other. And it is not acceptable that they act like that. But if you are going to continue to put yourself in positions where you can record it because it looks good, then you're going to see more of them acting like that, period. And
well, first of all, she didn't record it.
No,
she didn't
I'm not.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
If you put yourself into the positions where you confront these people, this is what you're going to get.
But Sonnie, I got to stop you. So hold on.
This is why Andrew put himself in this position. This is because they want to
Sonnie,
bring a spotlight to.
She went to breakfast. She was at breakfast. I mean, if living a normal life is putting yourself in a position to be confronted, then that's a whole different conversation.
Going out and standing right there to let them yell at you, I would not do that. If I'm going to leave the restaurant, then I'm going to leave the restaurant. I'm not going to stand there and see and let you yell at me for 5 minutes so I can prove how bad you are. Like that is not my character. That's not in my character to do that. Like, and I don't want to see how bad you are. I believe you. You don't have to convince me that you are what you are. Nor do I need it for video to understand that you are what you are. What I am saying is, in those positions, from the time I was 12 years old, when you are in the middle of a group of people yelling at you, that is not a recipe that you are walking away from. So, no, it is not one that I would put myself in, nor stand there, because I have seen the results of what happens when you stand in the middle of those circles. This has nothing to do with the specific person. I am talking about any situation that puts me in the middle of a group of people yelling at me. I am not going to stand there. I am going to make an exit out. Period, point blank, any situation. It cannot involve politics. It can have zero to do with politics. Just for my personal safety, I am not going to do it. I believe Antifa is crazy. I believe they are violent. I believe it is just one idiot away from doing something reprehensible that takes somebody's life that cannot be taken back. And I am not going to stand there and let that be me for any reason. Point blank and period. I believe who they are. I think they are exactly who I think they are. So no, I am not going to stand there and play with those people.
And I think that was a telling tale of how President Trump got into office. No one was going to put that yard sign in their yard because they weren't going to, it wasn't worth the backlash of what people were going to say because they knew who they wanted to vote for. They didn't want to hear what the other side wanted to say. And that's why the left was so surprised when he was put into office, because even today,
having that stance of thinking about your own personal security, it does not stop me from speaking out. It does not stop me from getting my point across. It's just I make sure I put myself in situations where my personal well-being is taken care of, because I have a husband and I have a daughter, and I would like to be there for them above being any martyr for any ideology or movement. And you have a lot of people on the left who don't mind being a martyr, who don't mind putting themselves in these positions because they think they're going to be written about or they think they're going to be remembered. That's half the appeal that the left has right now, that you can be absolutely nothing in life. You can have zero accomplishments. You can, never, ever seek or even try to do anything, but you can go out and do something in the name of social justice warriorism, and all of a sudden you will live in infamy forever. Like, this is
you and I
part of the
be
appeal that
apart.
they have.
You and I could.
Yes, but this is exactly what Curt's talking about. I mean, I'm living it. We're down at Ocean City on the boardwalk, thousands and thousands of people, and he puts a Trump 2020 sign on. My first reaction is, I don't want to get into a confrontation. I don't want the backlash. And he's welcoming it. But
no, I'm not welcoming it. I'm just not going to allow them to dictate the things I do. Like I said, Sonnie, I watched that incident. There's no way. First of all, the only reason she couldn't get out of the front of the place is because of the police escort and the crowd that gathered. That went from a group of 5 people whispering around a table to a group of 30 in about 15 minutes. The fact of the matter is...
No. Trust it, believe. I would have got out.
But I'm saying you wouldn't have gotten out.
If I would have had to go through one of them to get out, you would have had video of me going through one of them to get out.
Well,
and
there's
that's
your martyr.
why I don't put myself in that position, because I'm not going to stand and tolerate it. I will punch you in your face and walk over your body as you lay at my feet. I'm not.
Well, that's your. But Sonnie, hold on, Sonnie. That's your martyr. That's your martyr right there. You just talked about it. Those people that have never done anything.
Why I don't put myself
right. No,
in that
I know.
position.
I get that. But my point is, she didn't do anything out of the ordinary for every human being. She went out to breakfast with her friend, and they got accosted.
But
I mean, that's not putting yourself in a position.
She's also very visual.
But again,
she's all over the internet.
And that's fine.
I don't. Okay, I do not begrudge you going out to breakfast. I do not begrudge you sitting there and these people running up on you. Cool. At that point, I am leaving.
Yeah.
I am not standing there to let you yell at me. No one is going to tell me I have to stand there to let you yell at me. That is the point where I am saying everything goes differently for me. Like I am not going to be surrounded by any group of people where you entrench me and I fear for my own safety.
Yeah.
At that point,
Sonnie
is going to react and get herself out of that situation like I have been doing since I was 13 years old.
So you're saying you're at that breakfast when they first noticed these people getting together, you would have left. Okay. That's a fair point.
Yes.
So, yep, Sonnie, I got to go. We're caught up against it. Love catching up with you. It's been too long. Good luck with the move, and we'll catch up with you soon, darling.
All right. Y'all have a good one.
You too. Guys, have a great day. Tomorrow, Seb Gorka is going to join us. Dr. Sebastian Gorka will join us. Look forward to the show. Guys, have a great day. God bless. Welcome back, Sparkles.
Glad to be back.
All right. We'll catch you guys tomorrow.
Sonny's Corner with Sonnie Johnson.
Everything in hip-hop is not bad. Kanye agreed with us, so let's love him today until he raps tomorrow and you turn your back. Because if you jump off when the fun of the moment is over, then you are in fact making Kanye the token he is accused of being. So please, don't do that. Don't go there.
Sonny's Corner with Sonnie Johnson. Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.